This channel is part of the History Hit network. Stick around to find out more.
"18 months ago, Time Team discovered under this Gloucestershire field what may be one of the largest Roman villas yet excavated in Britain. We found whole ranges of rooms, including a beautiful bathhouse, arranged around 3 courtyards, spreading all over this plateau. But at the end of the 3 days, just when we thought we finally understood the villa, geophysics came up with another whole range of buildings running all the way up that hillside. Could this simply mean that the villa was even larger than we'd originally thought? Or was there something rather extraordinary happening here 1600 years ago? Time Team just had to come back to Turkdean to find out. This is what the site looked like at the beginning of our dig last year. And what an amazingly clear picture it was. The ground plan of a hitherto undiscovered Roman villa was there as a network of parch marks in the grass.
Oh, look at
It's quite
that!
clearly laid out, isn't it? Yeah.
Absolutely, it hasn't disappeared. And there's more stuff down here, look. And then there's a corner down there. Look how clear that. Oh, and look at these buildings down here, look.
They're separate, actually, from the main building, aren't
Yeah,
they?
well, they should be down towards... And there's something there by the spring, look.
But that wasn't the half of it. Over the next 3 days, as we opened trench after trench, the villa got bigger and bigger, until by the end of our 3 days, it seemed to cover the whole plateau and beyond, as geophysics came up with a whole new range of buildings.
It's another wing, it's another corridor, and it's going right up to the hill. I've put a ranging pole on the top that's about 200
So is it a villa?
metres wide.
Well, no, wait a minute,
It's
that's
the
by the
front-
spring.
That's near
it's
the
another-
spring.
yeah,
that's
One at a time, one at a time. It was unbelievable stuff. But time ran out on us, and the new range remained unexcavated. Until now.
If you love history, then you'll love History Hit. We have tons of exclusive documentaries about the most important people in history that you will not find anywhere else. Our extensive catalogue of documentaries covers everything from the rise of Hannibal Barca to the illustrious treasures of King Tut. So sign up today for broadcast quality documentaries uncovering the mysteries of the ancient world. Not only that, but we have a huge podcast network releasing new episodes every day, so you'll always have something to listen to. Sign up now for a free trial, and Odyssey fans get 50% off their first 3 months. Just be sure to use the code Odyssey at checkout.
Over the past few days, everyone's been speculating about what we might have got here. Some people say that it's probably a villa that was built at a different time during the Roman period. Some people are saying it could be a temple because it was built near a spring, so it could be a ritual site. Other people are saying that it might just be part of the original villa, a sort of granny wing. What is it?
Well, it could be any of those.
So how are we going to find out?
Well, we dig, of course, you know, we dig some trenches.
Where?
Well, you wait till you see the geophysics.
John and Chris have, in fact, done a lot more work on the whole site over the last year, and they've produced a completely new set of results.
Oh, looks as if you've nearly done the whole of Gloucestershire.
Feels like it as well. That's where we did the survey last year, Tony, the main villa on the plateau. And you remember we had the arm coming out. We've now expanded over the whole of the half of the hillside. And, well, I mean, we've got what appears to be a building here. A big area of noise that looks industrial. And then individual anomalies that, well, we're not quite sure, could be kilns.
What's a lot going up there?
Well, this we're not sure whether it's a modern land drain, stone line drain, or if that is a spring line, whether it's something to do with water courses.
Maybe up to a shrine or something.
There's actually dozens of things we could do here, isn't there?
In the end, Mick decides to start with just 2 targets. Phil's going to take Trench 1 into the aisled building and Carenza Trench 2 into the industrial area. And on this bitterly cold October morning, we're off. Last year, we found walls just inches under the surface, and there's an air of nervous anticipation as the machines get to work. No one's more anxious than Wilf Mustoe, the landowner. And hey, presto.
That's it. Just all you've got to do is just take the turf off and you're down onto it. Look at that. Look at it.
Within minutes, there's abundant stonework in both trenches. We're on the trail. But of what? Last year, you used a great phrase about this site. You said there might be a ritual component.
I did, yes.
That means what, a temple, I suppose?
Yes.
Why did you come to that conclusion?
Well, we were starting to think, given the proximity of the site to the springs, that there may actually be some kind of ritual focus around that.
People coming to worship at the springs.
That's right.
Yeah.
I mean, a very similar kind of site, focusing on a spring, has recently been discovered at Swindon, where you've got a steep hillside with a whole series of terraces, springs, probable shrines around each of these springs, and this water then being carried away down through a much larger complex, which is probably like the centre for the pilgrims and those who are coming to worship at the site. However, having seen the rest of the geophysics here now, there are no obvious structures that one would point to and say a temple. On the contrary, we've got some very clearly domestic-looking structures, such as this aisled building and other areas of activity. So it looks now as if what we've got is a villa, which is the centre of a large estate with its ancillary structures.
If Mark's right, then the new range of buildings could provide some really unusual archaeology. We'll be digging into the infrastructure of a villa estate, workshops, slave quarters, and possibly even small shrines. But first things first, we need evidence the new range is actually Roman. And in Trench 2, Carenza thinks she has it.
But we've got a very small coin from there, which is rather nice.
Take a look at that. Well, I can tell from the size almost straight away, and it's going to be considerably smaller than my fingernail. That is something that it's called a minim, which means literally tiny.
It's like the 5p piece these days, you always lose all the time.
It's even worse than that, and they probably use them in bags, hundreds and hundreds of them actually in a bag. It's the sort of thing, if you drop that, you wouldn't even bother to pick it up.
No, you wouldn't, would you? It's just
totally insignificant. But it does fix a date for us. We are looking at 4th century activity.
Brilliant. It's Roman, and it's the same date, 4th century, as the villa. And taken with a growing collection of slag fragments, it's beginning to look as if this area was some kind of workshop. Though there's a way to go before we'll know what was made here. In Trench 1, meanwhile, an impressively crisp structure is emerging from the ground. Blimey, Mick's using a shovel. You must be excited.
Mr. Harding's clear-up man,
I've got to keep him in training, you see.
Hey, this looks a bit good, isn't it?
It's amazing, isn't it?
Get him, come on here.
Yeah, come clean it up, yeah.
We got a superb end of a building.
Yeah.
Just sight down it.
This is what the archaeologists have started referring to as an aisled barn. Apparently a common feature on large villa sites, probably used for storing farm produce or livestock. And it too is producing finds.
Oh, well, we've got some coins. Yeah. Mark's got some coins over here.
Yeah, we've had 5 coins so far come out. A couple of them are actually rather nice. Let's have a look at them. Lost it.
Oh no! Day 1 and we've lost our first find.
Mike, bring the machine over.
Mike!
Yeah.
We've lost a find.
I was over there and I've walked back this way. It's the Constantinopolis.
That way!
Ah, there.
Hey!
Second time today.
We're never going to live that down. We're never going to live that down.
What is it?
It's a commemorative issue
It's a lost
from
coin.
about 330 to 35 AD, issued to mark the foundation of Constantinople as the new capital of the Roman
So
Empire.
300s again.
And we've got another one here which is slightly later, dates to between the period of about 364, 375 AD, and shows a figure of victory and the legend Securitas Republicae, the safety of the state.
And does that compare well with what we had last year?
Yeah, it's very consistent with last year.
I suppose that's good, because it now ties both our buildings into the villa estate. But I must admit I'd hoped to find something a bit more exciting than a barn.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
But at least we've got lots more targets, and John and Chris are taking a closer look at the next one. The strange blob they thought might be a kiln.
9.
They're using a machine that picks up strong magnetic readings in the ground, the sort of thing that might have been caused by burning, or something completely different.
What was that? About 6-7 metres across, about that? A bit more?
Yeah,
But that's...
doesn't look kiln-like.
No, it doesn't, does it? I mean, those responses, that might be a rubbish pit, but it's not a kiln.
Huge rubbish pit.
Yeah, I guess.
Or a Ford Cortina 20 metres down.
Again.
There's only one way to find out, and in no time, our third trench is underway. We know that in the 3rd and 4th century there was this fantastic Roman villa covering this entire plateau. But what were the Romans doing, building here, stuck out in the wilds of Gloucestershire?
Well, it wasn't really the wilds of Gloucestershire. In Roman times, this was one of the richest agricultural parts of the province. We're right down in the settled southern part of Britain. We're not very far away from that great Roman city at Cirencester, which was the second biggest city in Roman Britain. And when the Romans invaded, the way they ruled was to hand the land back to the local bigwigs, the local tribal aristocrats, because that's how you got things to run. You'd set them up as the local Romans. By giving them back their own land, that gave them the qualification to sit on the town council. In that position, they could run the local economy, run the local society in the way that they wanted and passed it up for themselves.
So the guy who owned this villa was a local bloke pretending to be a Roman, all dressed up.
We don't know that for certain, but it's a real probability that the chap and his family who lived here could trace their ancestry back through generations to the tribal leaders of this part of the world when the Romans arrived.
But it was a golden age.
It was. I mean, this is a really exceptional house, one of many exceptional houses in this part of Britain, and they enjoyed a top end of Roman living.
We excavated some evidence of that living last year in the main villa. There was the ornate bathhouse with fantastic painted plaster on the inside. We also got plenty of jewellery, including this lovely brooch. And the site was full of high-status pottery. This year, we can add to that list. We found an inhabitant. John, who is this man you're dressed as?
Well, if you can imagine, the Romans were here for 400 years. We always get the impression of them wearing sandals and
toga,
the whole thing. Well, at about the end of the Roman Empire, this is what your average well-to-do Roman would be wearing. No more sandals, we're looking at closed-in boots, perones, nice and warm. Early on in the empire, the Romans were very derogatory about the Celts and the Germanics wearing trousers. They called them braccatai, very derisive term. But once again, by the end of the period, they're wearing them because they're practical. And on a day like this, you can understand why.
Is this how it's supposed to go?
Well,
Amazing! And this is from the same period too, presumably. Is it comfortable?
It's a bit bulky. I mean, I don't know how easily you'll be able to move about, really to anything practical. It's not too cold, though I have got jeans on underneath at the moment, so I don't know what it would be like. It's a bit drafty around the ankles, I must say.
Well, if she hadn't been wearing her Roman jeans, what would she have been wearing under her dress?
They would have worn Roman underwear. They would have been linen bloomers, basically.
They found a pair of Roman knickers, didn't they?
Well, they've got
somewhere?
leather knickers from London, but I
That's
don't think
it,
they're worn
yes,
by
yeah.
everybody. They'd be jolly uncomfortable.
Leather knickers. Leather knickers, now there's a thing. These days, Phil's prone to wearing strange costumes too. His bad back means he has to kneel rather than squat when he's scraping, and his delicate knees need protection. But it's worth the effort. because in Trench 1, the barn is taking a turn for the better.
God, there's a lot going on in here, ain't there?
In particular, we're getting some intriguing and very un-barn-like finds.
Oh, fantastic. Look at that.
These are just 2 of the 5 mosaic fragments we've found so far, nearly double last year's haul. And Phil's pulling out bits of domestic pot all over the place.
Oh, look at that. That is a nice room.
This is the rim of a storage jar. And this is part of a mortarium, a bowl used for preparing food.
You've got the little granules in here for grinding up the food, so it's a very specifically Roman type of vessel.
And that's definitely a throne.
Definitely wheel throne, certainly made in Britain, probably in the Oxfordshire area.
How are we doing date-wise?
Well, we're looking at something that's possibly 2nd century, judging by that rounded.
As early as that?
Well, I have to. I can't be absolutely certain, but it's certainly not into the 4th century.
You're hedging your bets.
The 3rd century. third century. Oh, no. I know your time. Looking for a quick answer. I don't think we're not looking at something that's 4th century. We're looking at something that's 3rd century or before.
The jar would have been about 2 feet high, used for storing oil or spices. And the mortarium, which turned out to be 3rd century, would have looked like this. Great stuff, but if this is, as the archaeologists believe, a barn, how come we're finding lots of domestic material in it? There's mystery in the Trench 2 workshop as well. No one can tell whether this mass of stones is wall or floor, and we still don't know what kind of work went on here. To find out, we'll have to lift the stones, but before we do, they've got to be scrupulously recorded. So Carenza has moved on to Trench 3, the one on the blob, where she seems to have found neither kiln nor cortina. This looks like clay.
It looks like clay from down here as well, actually.
So is there anything there at all?
Well, yeah, there is. We've got an edge here. So we've got a lot of stones in the edge here, and there's pink here suggesting there's been heat or burning, changing the colour of the limestone. We're in the sort of bottom left-hand quadrant of that big circular blob. So like the rest of it goes up right round there behind you and down sort of just behind us.
What do you think it might be?
Well, I was talking to Mark about it, and he came up with it's a very interesting idea, I think, as to whether it's not a lime kiln. I mean, there's no indication of date, and there are all
presumably it could be Saxon or medieval. It doesn't have to be Roman.
One bit of Roman pot,
but you see, that's very interesting, because it could either be the lime kiln to make the mortar for the Roman buildings down there, or it could equally well be something from the Middle Ages where they're robbing the remains of the Roman villa, reducing it to lime to take off the mortar in the churches and manor houses around here.
But Mick's attention is soon drawn back to the aisled building in Trench 1. The domestic finds, and now a layer of plaster on the floor, have set him thinking.
Well, we've got 4 or 5 tesserae from it now. We've got a lot of plaster and mortar in the bottom of it. So, you know, it's probably not an agricultural building as far, you know, from that. And we've got some nice pottery.
So what do you think it could be?
Well, I mean, it just crossed my mind it might be, you know, where the main house was, perhaps.
Well, that would be a bit different, wouldn't it?
Well, I mean, you know, we didn't get much like that last year, so, you know, I mean, there ought to be something that's a bit more domestic and house-like here somewhere.
So far from being dull, the aisled structure in Trench 1 could be the most important building on the whole site. Is Mick right? Join us after the break. Yesterday evening, Mick came up with the rather radical theory that the aisled building in Trench 1, which we'd all thought was some kind of barn, is in fact another villa building. You'd have thought then that Mick would be hard at work here proving his theory. But he's not. He's 100 yards away up here, opening a 4th trench. What's going on?
Let me show you on the map. This is the... Let's get it the right way round. We're like that. There's our Trench 1, Trench 2, Trench 3. And we've got these whole series of springs across the side of the hill. of which there's one down there, one right up the top over there, and we're actually digging in this one here.
How do you know there's springs?
Well, that one, the farmers piped water out of it. That one's still got water out of it, and this one's actually a little hollow with a platform on it, and it looks as if that probably was actually a spring.
Yeah.
And we're interested in these because not only was there a water supply needed for the buildings, but these are the sort of places you get shrines or offertory places. They're ritual centres, in fact.
What sort of thing might you expect to find then?
Well, we might find a structure over the top, or we might find offerings dropped into it.
So we're back into ritual again. I thought we'd knocked that one on the head.
Well, no, it's always a likely function for sites like this. You know,
the nearby villa at Chedworth, for instance, that was dug in the 19th century, has a little nymphaeum built around the spring.
Well, I'm going to give you till lunchtime.
All right.
Mick wants to track the whole water system. So in addition to trench 4 here, he's opened up a 5th right up here, where according to local rumour, the springs actually rise. And he thinks this hollow could be a platform for a shrine. So he's got Mick the Dig hunting for signs of water and ritual. Meanwhile, we're planning some ritual activity of our own. We're going to build a Roman altar and dedicate it to Dea Fortuna, the goddess of good fortune, who we're pretty sure has helped us uncover this site. Guy's composed a dedication to Dea Fortuna from Time Team with thanks. But there's a dispute about the Latin translation.
It's very difficult to find Latin for time team. Time is tempus, which we've cut down to temp here. But what we use for team is a bit more difficult. I've chosen Grex because it's 4 letters and it fits very neatly with our inscription. But it's a slightly sort of a time gang or time band is what. But Lindsay doesn't like that. She wants a more flattering name.
It is a 4-letter word. It is rather derogatory when used for human beings.
What do you go for?
Sheep or something like that. Well, I think, do you see yourself as athletes or gladiators? Because perhaps manners might be better.
Oh, good Lord, I don't know that I see myself as an athlete. And Mick, certainly, no way. No, we stick with gang.
Thank you very much. Lindsay and I are going to go fight it out over a Latin dictionary.
Yeah.
Tempus Grex it is then, and Giles is soon chipping away. And it looks like the goddess approves. This is Trench 1, our mystery trench, the one that could prove to be the key to the whole site. Originally, we thought it was probably some sort of Roman barn with great aisles running through it. But then last night, Mick had the idea that it could actually be a high-status building. Phil, what is it?
It most certainly is a high-status building. I mean, look, we've got plastered walls on the outside. And most amazingly, they're painted.
You wouldn't get that on a barn,
You most certainly would not.
The evidence is stacking up. But we'll need more than plaster on an exterior wall before we can call this building a villa. So there's still plenty of digging to do. As we dig, the finds keep coming, and all of them are reassuringly domestic.
I quite like this stripy stuff. Look, it's on my jumper.
There's plenty enough to keep the local school children busy. But the news from the industrial trenches is less good. A layer of charcoal in the Trench 3 pit confirms its use as a kiln, but there's no chance of dating it. And the stonework in Trench 2 is several layers thick, and it doesn't look like we'll ever untangle it. So Mick decides to close them both.
How are you getting on here, Vaughan? Oh,
Well,
wow.
I think we found
Good grief.
something.
That's flowing under there, isn't it?
It certainly is.
Can we get the capstones off? And
Yep.
Can I help it?
There we go. Be careful they don't fall in.
Don't fall in. Got it. Now, can I give you a hand with this one?
You can see, isn't that clear, the water in there?
And look how deep it all is.
Well, I'm just thinking, our question with this was whether it was anything to do with the Roman occupation here, David. Do you think that's possible? Would you get
I
something
think
still running like
I think it's highly likely. I mean, you'd expect a water supply to feed the villa.
There's an awful lot of scale built up on the sides.
There was something very similar to this discovered at Woodchester, which was definitely Roman, and the water was still flowing through it.
Like this is flowing
Such as
through
you see here.
And it's very deep within the section, isn't it?
It is.
It's got a good. That's the level at which it's cut in, and there's a good 2/3 of a metre of soil
That's
above
right.
it.
So it is very likely it could be Roman.
That's absolutely fantastic. Isn't it amazing just seeing it flowing like that?
And listening
this is
to
what
it.
the Romans would have drunk from.
However, Trench 5, the supposed source of the spring, is still barren of archaeology, so we've no idea yet where the water comes from. But John and Chris think they know where it goes to.
This anomaly here, that's the stone conduit, and it comes down and then actually in at that point, and the white splodge is where we couldn't get the probes into the ground. Now this coincides with the back of the building that we're excavating over there. And we've marked what we think is the back line. And it's this line of canes here. And so you've got the front of the building down there, and the back wall approximately here.
It's a massive building, isn't it?
It is a big
You
building.
imagine it right, all that lot there.
But they're not going to build right adjacent to the spring, are they? We're not going to get both in one trench.
Well,
surely.
probably not, but we
if you
want to
look
look
at
at
the
the spring
plot-
first.
We think this is the back wall here. Now there may be an arm going down to the spring.
So John and Chris think they've found not only the other end of the aisled building, but a possible link between it and the spring outflow. And Mick, in fact, decides to open 2 new trenches. Trench 6A, from the corner of the building to the spring outflow, and Trench 6B, further along, to establish the other corner. And by lunchtime, we've got diggers hard at work in 5 trenches across the site. First with the breakthrough is David in Trench 1, at the bottom end of the aisled building.
This morning rather, we had a piece of red plaster
Yeah,
falling
yeah,
from
I
that
saw that,
wall,
yeah.
which we thought was external rendering.
Yeah.
Well, now we're coming across this larger pieces of
crikey.
painted plaster.
Well, you got about 4 colours on that, have you?
That's right.
Looks like black, white, red, and blue.
Blue. That's right. But there are deposits all over here. Look, it's obviously fallen off this wall, and what we thought was an outside wall clearly probably isn't. So the chances are that these are deposits of fallen wall plaster, and underneath this we're going to find a floor.
Oh.
Or even a mosaic.
Yeah.
And then the room is probably quite large. How far we don't know for sure, but it extends quite a way in this direction, I suspect, to the south.
Yeah.
And then possibly as far back as roughly here.
So it's heading towards the excavations last year, then, the buildings
last year.
Right.
Correct. And then in this direction, I suspect the northern wall is a continuation of this wall here. But
A high-status room with plaster just about clinches this as a villa.
Right. That's cracking, isn't it?
It is, it's marvellous.
And it gets better. It turns out it's even older than the 4th century house we found last year.
This is material that has come from a great big deposit of soil that predates the construction of this stone building. And it's all consistently late 2nd to early 3rd century AD, probably no later than about 240 AD. We've got this large mortarium, this mixing bowl from the Oxford region. The rim form is typical of a type that dates to the late 2nd, early 3rd century AD. We've got evidence for milling on a perhaps industrial scale with this very large millstone. You can see the rilling on the edge here, probably from Yorkshire, millstone grit. We've got part of a tankard for drinking out of. This is a classic 2nd and 3rd century form in the Severn Valley. And we've also got pieces of decorated Samian ware, which would also be consistent with the 2nd century date. So
Now, hold on, does that mean that the building would be 2nd century, or could that be
No.
fill that's gone in
This is
afterwards?
fill that has gone in to level up this area prior to the construction of this building. So it's a very important piece of evidence.
It tells us our new building predates the one we excavated last year by up to 100 years, and it looked rather different.
It's almost like a church in its basic form. The building seems divided with a nave and aisles. And then in Trench 1, we now know that we think we know that we're going to have a cross range at the west end, such as you see here.
But do you think we're actually looking at somewhere that people were living in, or do you think this is just an out hall or something like that?
Definitely living in this one. And they're living in some quite sophisticated rooms. don't forget that sometimes these buildings get very developed over the years. For example, you may find that the aisles get divided and in some cases even get given mosaics.
So although it's not as elaborate in construction as last year's, it could still have been a very impressive building. And all the while, Carenza's been scraping away at this end of it in trenches 6A and B. Sadly, she's found no sign of a link to the springs. But by merging the two trenches in the thinnest excavation I've ever seen, she's uncovered the whole of her end of the building. And it's the best-looking wall of the dig. This is fairly amazing, isn't it?
Fantastic, isn't it? Well, this is the building that Geophys picked up. As you can see, we've got a wall coming in dead straight here, 90-degree turn, dead straight.
Almost too good to be
all
true,
the way
actually,
along
isn't it?
here. And then another 90-degree turn off this way.
What's this here?
This is roof stone. So this is what this building would have been roofed with. So we're really pleased to discover that, because that's a big help in trying to work out what the building looked like. Possibly an entrance turning in here. And then the wall picks up again, going the same direction that way, but we're not entirely certain. It's actually the same wall, it's a different width, it looks a bit rougher. That's why we're pleased that we've actually followed this wall, because we're really trying to link up with how this building relates to anything that might come up around the spring. And I was concerned that if we just did a section there and then picked it up here, we would have had no idea whether it was the same wall. So if something funny had happened in between, we'd have ended up not understanding the link between the two. And in fact, as it happens, there does seem to be something funny happening in between, because we've got this entrance and the wall looks a bit different.
Have you got that entrance on the Geophys?
It does actually show, Tony. That was the corner Carenza was talking about.
Yeah.
We followed the wall along, and then there's a break at this point. We appear to have one block there, and then a second block on this side. And David Neal was talking about two possible tower rooms with an entrance coming through here.
A tower room? What sort of building have we got? It's like a palace.
Well,
I mean,
this is certainly a villa I think we're dealing with now.
The building's stunning metamorphosis from barn to villa has passed unnoticed at the altar factory, where Giles is still frantically chiselling. And with the block beginning to look altar-like, it's time to start on the decoration. Chris, our Roman paint expert, is going to make black, red, and the real tester, blue.
Right, we need the recipe.
Well, we've got Vitruvius here, who was an ancient writer, who mostly writing for architects.
The basic ingredients of Vitruvius's recipe are sand, copper, and soda. These, he says, must be ground together, then moistened, shaped into small balls, and put onto the fire to roast overnight.
In this way, the copper and the sand burning together, owing to the vehemence of the fire, dry together, and interchanging their vapours lose their properties, and their own character being overcome by the vehemence of the fire, they acquire a blue colour.
With any luck. All this work is for the goddess of good fortune herself, and it feels like she's really on our side. Just as we're packing up after a really successful day's archaeology, she guides us to these beautiful brooches.
They were both found in the stream by Tim, the metal detector man, the stream just behind us here.
And what are they made of?
Well, that's proving a bit difficult. They should be made of bronze, but they've got a very strange colour being in the stream.
Oh, yeah,
so
they've got this calcium deposit on them.
they might be made of silver, but certainly this one here has got traces of silver plating, so they would have looked like silver.
And what's this on the back? It's like a spring?
Well, that's the spring. Yes, that's the spring, and it's been held in place by a little iron pin.
They're the safety pin of the Roman world, really.
What sort of date are they?
They're both late 1st century.
1st century?
Yeah, so it's early. We have some pottery of roughly the same sort of date,
Yes,
don't we?
a little bit of pottery, which is
You know,
early.
we've got a 400-year span for this site now.
Great. So they're not only beautiful finds, they're very useful for us.
Yeah, because it's that early period.
Has been a fantastic day for us. It's not often that you find a brand new Roman villa, and we've got the extent of it right from up there to down there. Tomorrow we're going to get inside this structure to find out what the people who lived here were actually doing here 1700 years ago. Join us after the break. Beginning of day 3, it's still bitterly cold up here. I don't know what the Romans were doing building on top of this hill, but if the archaeologists are right, then this is the entrance to the villa. But what was inside it, we don't yet know. What do you think, Mick?
Well, that's what we were just discussing, because I'd rather assumed you came through that door into a courtyard, but David says not.
No, I don't think so. I think you came through that door into what was effectively like a barn with a range of rooms on the north side. So, for example, this is the north side of the building. It's coming down here. You may have a series of division walls coming through here. Then the rooms continuing on, dividing up this aisle.
And then more rooms on the other side?
That's right.
So how are we going to establish that?
Well, the idea is to put a trench, to extend this trench through here.
Back to this point here.
To make it an L-shaped trench, and we should then resolve whether this really is the entrance, and to establish the divisions that we've been thinking about.
Kevin. You can take an inch out of it.
While the mechanical digger extends trench 6 at the front of the building, Phil and David have got something to show Mick at the other end, in trench 1.
That is the old original ground surface where we think the turf line is.
Right.
Look at this, it's going down much, much deeper.
Yeah.
We've had masses and masses and masses of painted wall plaster in there
I've
that's
seen
gone
that,
in there.
Yeah.
It's going on down. And I mean, David, you reckon it's a cellar?
I'm sure it's a cellar, yeah. This is clearly the north wall of the cellar. The wall presumably comes around here, turns down here, and comes back here.
Well, presumably this is coming from rooms up above, is it, David?
No,
it
could not necessarily, because it could be coming from the walls of the room. Now, you may think, well, why do you have painted plaster on a cellar?
Well, that's what occurred to me.
That's right.
You've only got wine in yours, mate.
But sometimes these rooms were not just used for keeping goods in and produce. I mean, they had sometimes a quasi-religious significance. For example, there's locally at Whitcombe, they found painted plaster on the wall of the cellar there. And of course, the famous example is Lullingstone.
In Kent,
where you had the niche with the nymphs with water coming out of their breasts.
Yeah.
Water-producing nymphs are probably beyond even Giles's expertise with the chisel, but he's doing a grand job on the altar. In the paint shop, however, Chris is looking worried. Chris, even I know this is not Roman.
No, you're quite right there. We've had a bit of a disaster with the blue pigment.
What happened?
Well, we put it in a kiln overnight to get the temperature right.
Yeah.
And it's melted the pot, so it's got up to temperature, but it hasn't gone blue.
That is definitely not blue, is it?
So we're having to resort to modern methods.
Ooh, got a bit of poke, isn't it? While Chris is barbecuing the balls, I've been given the much simpler task of grinding charcoal to make black. As the balls cool down, Chris sets about making the red pigment from yellow ochre by heating it. And that'll turn red, will it?
Yeah, that's the general idea.
Sounds dodgy to me, but what do I know? Well, it seems to be going already. Oh, it's smoky, isn't it? Conditions these Romans worked in. Now all we need is a little vinegar. How much do I put in?
Well, put a splash in and then a bit more. Pour it a bit more in. Yeah,
oh, that's very red, isn't it? It's a very nice colour, that.
Yeah, well, that'll do our lettering or inscription.
How's our blue doing?
Yeah, no, let's have a look. Let's knock it with the tongs and have a look and see. No, it doesn't seem to have gone blue, does it? It's all a bit grey on the inside, so I think we're going to have another couple of goes with the blowtorch on that.
It's all going much better down on the site.
So look.
Tim has plucked yet another beautiful brooch from the stream.
Wow, look at that. Isn't that wonderful? Look at the colours in that. The bright orange is quite unusual to have the really bright orange like that. 2nd century? I mean, the only thing missing is the pin. That really is beautiful. Presumably they're being thrown on to the stream somewhere further up, and it's just the force of water has over the years brought them further down here.
And something pretty amazing's just surfaced in Trench 6 near the entrance to the villa.
This is the most fantastic find I think we've ever found. This is so unexpected, I can't believe it. Hang on, it's a bit difficult to see if I just rub a bit of dirt over it. Can you see there? F-I...
Well, well, look at that. What a sound choice of a name to write in a block of stone.
I'm not sure, we haven't got a bit of a C coming through at the bottom
we
here.
seem to have other letters actually. There is a suggestion of a letter just there.
No. Phil is perfectly sufficient.
And another letter.
Yeah. What do you think it might be, David? It looks quite crude. Surprisingly.
Well, that fit.
Well, I assume that it's part of it's been in a wall. Somebody's cut an inscription, conceivably associated with a memorial stone. That is possible. And then clearly it's been demolished, and the stone has been rebuilt into this.
With the archaeology in great shape, Mick heads for the incident room, where he hopes the finds will reveal something about life inside our villa.
How are you getting on then? Any idea?
We've got masses of stuff, including Samian pottery, coins, a child's earring, and this lot, the wall plaster from the cellar in Trench 1. Some of the ornate decoration is amazingly well preserved and suggests a distinctive colour scheme.
The basic theme of this room was obviously mustard yellow. Yes. So it must have been like living in a pot of pea and ham soup. Not to our taste at all.
Yeah. Lindsay's also had a closer look at the two brooches we found yesterday and has noticed something peculiar.
They both seem to have been snapped in half.
What deliberately, do you mean?
Yes, I think they have been, because neither of these are broken where you would expect them to be broken, and that does suggest that they have been thrown into the stream as part of a ritual activity.
Really?
You ritually kill the object as
Yes.
you throw it into
If you
the
break
stream.
it, you destroy its power. Nobody else can use it, and you've ended it.
These brooches are our first real evidence the springs were a focus of ritual activity. They might have been thrown into the system up here, where the springs are said to rise.
Lovely. You can take that loose out of there, Kevin. Yeah. And clear through again. I'll go and have a look. Okay.
Except Trench 5 is still dry as a bone.
At least it gives some...
Let's have a look at that, Kevin. Some more stone down here.
Solid,
isn't
isn't
it?
it?
More.
What's that?
What's that loose slab?
It's a bit more flat and stuff. Oh
no.
Ah. And you've got water
Running
again.
water. It looks very similar to the culvert down in the other trench, doesn't it?
But does it connect with the culvert in Trench 4 and the outflow by our new villa building back on the main site? If it does, not only are we back on the trail of ritual activity here, but we'll have uncovered the reason people chose to live here in the first place.
Well, look, standing up here, Tony, we're looking at the most sheltered spot on this wonderful setting. And for a basic farming community, shelter and the running water we've got coming down past the building are going to be two of the most important priorities. It's really a continuity of the Iron Age farming that we know has been going on, not just on this site, but the whole general area, right back for centuries.
I think what you've got to remember as well is you're dealing here with an extended family. It's not just, mum, dad and a couple of children. It's probably 2 or 3 generations and all their dependents as well in this great communal structure.
And that family would have lived there for, what, about 100 years or so before they decided to move up here?
That's right.
Well, possibly our family and the senior man living there, he may have had enough wealth to give himself a position in the local towns like Cirencester or Gloucester, and that may have allowed him the opportunity to get better off and better off over the centuries after that, moving up here eventually once his priorities change.
I understand you've had a little bit of trouble with the manufacturing of the blue, is that right?
Yeah, domestic production has totally failed, so we've had to resort to import. So we've got some very expensively imported indigo here, which we'll use for the blue.
But you
part.
can assure me that all the other colours have been made authentically?
Yes, absolutely, definitely.
Excellent.
And so the painting can begin.
Do you know how quickly this goes off?
It'll dry almost immediately, I would have thought.
Is that right? Is there any room for error?
Not a lot.
Don't screw it up, Phil. Yeah.
I don't want to do it.
With only a few hours left before the sacrifice is due, they'd better get cracking.
Ooh, like spreading mustard.
Back on the site, the extension to Trench 6 has revealed the 2 tower rooms the archaeologists hope to find either side of the entrance. And with much finer stonework than the house itself, it looks to Carenza as if they were a later embellishment. But these little rooms in here that were added on, they really look very tiny, almost functionless.
Well, I think that's probably, yes, I mean, they're small enough to have a guard or keep a few bits and pieces in, but yes, I think really it's embellishment. It's to make the building look more impressive. It's to create a very imposing facade for anyone approaching from down here. And the walls are so much better made than the really rather rough walls that we've got there. It's a big step up. Instead of just being a nice looking farmhouse, you're making it into a really impressive residence.
Stuart to Mark.
Here, Stuart, over.
Mark, we're going to put some dye down at the spring source here.
Can you see whether it comes through at your end? Will do. What is this? Some patent old Roman pregnancy test? Over.
No, we've got the pucker stuff here. It's
Drained tracing dye, and it's non-toxic.
so you can have a taste of it when it comes through.
We'll see how well it travels. I'm getting in position. Out.
Okay, here we go.
Wow, look at that.
It just explodes in colour, doesn't it?
Absolutely fantastic. Now it's just a question of waiting.
Give you a bet.
5 minutes.
Go, I'll go for 7 minutes.
1 minute. 3 minutes. 4 minutes. Until...
Hello, Stuart. We have blue water down here. Blue water. Over.
Oh, that's fantastic. We know where the water's coming from.
And we know where it's going.
But do we? Will it reach the outflow by our villa? Where the archaeologists are feeling very pleased with themselves. A brand new villa is pretty good going for 3 days' work. I'm a Roman potential buyer of your villa.
Bijou dwelling, yes.
You can impress me, can you?
Very high status.
Oh, I can see these lovely great tower
That's
rooms
right.
here.
This is your entrance. You'd come through.
Cobbled entrance
Now
hall.
we open the doors,
Yeah.
which leads us into this aisled hall. It's a bit like a church with a very high roof.
How high?
Oh, 40 feet perhaps.
Wow.
As
Do you
high
like
as
the
that,
timber work
with
at the top?
clerestory windows along the side.
And I've got rooms here.
Rooms to the north, all along that side, perhaps rooms
And
along
down
here.
that side of there.
And don't forget, we're sharing this with animals and farm equipment.
Yeah. What sort of windows did you say?
Clerestory windows.
What's
These
that
are
mean?
little small windows at the tops of the walls.
Just like a church high up in
windows.
the wall.
Yeah.
And then here we come down to these apartments at this end.
Yes.
So that imagine then, as you walked across, you would have walked into a room above the cellar.
All your living rooms are probably up at this level, you see, because it would have come more or less on a level from the door where we came in.
Yeah.
So a lot of it's going on up above us here.
Right.
That's where your main living rooms would be.
It's a nice place.
Yeah,
It's
well,
beautiful.
You know, you fancy it, then? We got planning permission for a new one over on that hill.
And a swimming pool.
Yeah, and the swimming pool.
All right, I'll live here for about 100 years.
Yeah.
And then I'll go and live up on the hill. So the story of the new villa is complete. There may well have been a very basic house here in the 1st and 2nd centuries. But in the early 3rd century, it was replaced by the aisled hall, complete with cellar, we've excavated this week. Then, as the owners accrued more wealth, probably in the mid-3rd century, they added the towers to make an imposing front entrance. But even that wasn't enough for our upwardly mobile inhabitants, because by the end of the 3rd century, they've moved out of here into the really grand villa we excavated last year. And to cap it all, we've got the final results from the pregnancy test. This is the outflow by Trench 6.
Look at this.
Oh, magic.
Yeah.
How long did it take then?
We reckon
time it?
about 12 minutes.
12.
to get right down
we
here.
were both wrong up there. Mick reckoned 5, I reckoned 7.
Yeah. 12 minutes, and that's what, 250 metres
Yeah.
maximum?
Well, we've definitely got the spring head up there. The water's
Right.
bubbling out. We've got
Right,
stone lined
good,
into it. That's
good.
the original Roman spring head up there.
You're happy about that
Absolutely
now?
happy, yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah. So these culverts down here must be Roman.
They've got to be. It's basically an aqueduct system.
Yeah, yeah.
So now we feel we've really cracked the whole site. Imagine the imposing 4th century house on the hill with its 3 courtyards. The old villa down the hill now houses farm workers and slaves. Overlooking the site is a shrine at the head of the water system that probably brought the inhabitants here in the first place. So all that remains now is to give thanks to the goddess who helped us find it all. Where would it have been positioned?
Well, somewhere in the house or in the shrine of the house. This is a household altar.
And would it just have been a decorative altar or would it have been practical?
Oh no, this is a working piece of equipment. And you come and you pour a libation, a sort of family ceremony, on the altar.
What, in here?
Yes, that's called the focus, and that's where the libation should be poured.
Well, I think we ought to say our thanks to the goddess of fortune, don't you? I think so. I'm going to mess it up a bit. To the goddess of good fortune.
The goddess of good fortune.
It's gone blue, look!
It's a miracle!